Hey, everybody. This is Jon Fleischman with SoDoesItMatter.com, where we're all California politics all of the time. Although today we're going to be looking east to Washington, D.C., but we'll be doing it through the eyes of a Californian. Today we're going to be spending some time with my friend, Congressman Jay Obernolte, who is with us. And before he has a chance to chime in here, we have a much honored tradition on our podcasts on this program where I go over to our friends at ChatGPT and I just say, I'm doing my podcast today. I'm introducing Congressman Jay Obernolte. Write me an introduction. You're smiling because you've probably seen this before. I haven't
No,
read it.
I'm smiling because I have no idea what you're gonna read.
Yeah,
If
I
it's
have no
bad, I'm
idea
gonna say it's
either.
a hallucination.
It could be. If it introduces you as Democrat Jay Obernolte, then you know that it hallucinated. So here we go. Today's guest is Congressman Jay Obernolte, who represents California's 3rd congressional district and has quickly become one of the most influential Republican voices in Washington on technology and policy. Before coming to Congress, Jay built a successful career as a software engineer, video game developer, and small business owner, a background that gives him something rare on Capitol Hill: real technical fluency in the issues shaping the future. That expertise has made him a central figure in Congress's work on artificial intelligence, where he has been deeply involved in shaping the conversation around AI development, regulation, and the balance between innovation and accountability. He serves as co-chair of the Bipartisan House AI Task Force, putting him at the forefront of one of the most consequential policy debates in the country right now: how the United States leads on AI without stifling the very innovation that drives it. And recently, his colleagues elevated him to the major leadership role as chairman of the House Republican Policy Committee. That position places him at the center of shaping Republican policy strategy across a wide range of issues, from technology and economic growth to national priorities and legislative direction. At a time when Washington is struggling to keep pace with rapid technological change, Jay Obernolte is one of the few members of Congress working at the intersection of policy, innovation, and real-world expertise. That's not bad.
Very flattering. Thanks, ChatGPT.
Maybe I need to cut and paste that and send that to your communications director, and we can integrate some of that language into whatever it is you send to groups and
My official
organizations.
bio, yeah.
Anyways, thank you very much for joining us. Jay, you and I go back, I think we met when you first ran for the state legislature. What year was that?
Let's see, that would have been 12 years ago. So what is that? I got to do the math on that.
Oh, that's okay. So it's 2014.
Yeah, 14. Yep.
14. Back when you were in the legislature, I was still very much engaged with my old website, Flash Report, writing on politics of Sacramento, and we got to interact quite a bit during that time. And now you're in this great adventure in Congress. So I have to ask the first question I need to ask, because it's the question that people always ask me. And I know you're not a freshman anymore, far be it. But what was the most significant difference between what you thought being a member of Congress would be when you ran to be in Congress and what it's actually ended up being?
Okay, I'll give you two answers. One, when I served in the California State Assembly, one of the things that I really liked about it is that it is actually a deliberative body, because everyone is always on the chamber floor when we are hearing bills, because you're required to be there. In fact, you're locked in on the floor. It's called quorum call, and you're not allowed to leave once you're there. And so when someone stands up to speak on a bill, if that person is well respected, everyone will stop what they're doing and listen. And you can actually change minds there when you're having debate on a bill. And you come to Congress and you realize that when you watch bill debate on C-SPAN, there's a reason why the camera is clipped in so close to the speaker, because the rest of the chamber is empty. So I preside sometimes. I'm on the pro tem team. So there might be me sitting up on the rostrum with the gavel, someone debating, someone waiting, to speak on the debate, and then the floor staff. And that's it. That's all there is in the whole chamber. And so it's not like you're speaking for anyone except the cameras, which is really not as much fun. And then for if you have a West Coast district, the constant travel. Some of my colleagues that have East Coast districts were they can drive home or they get on a train and 2 hours they're home and they realize, like, if we have votes on a Friday and votes on a Monday, unless there's a compelling reason to go back to the district, like an event or a speech or something, you don't do it because, you spend half your time en route. It's so much wasted productivity, and that is tough to do week after week.
All right. Hey, so there's a couple things that I thought would be fun to talk about with our time together. And actually, ChatGPT was very helpful in helping to set the table here because the first thing I wanted to talk about, because it's kind of newsy and I think it's interesting, is that you've recently, and when I say recently, like days ago, have been elected to be the chairman of the House Republican Policy Committee. And I can tell you that the vast majority of the people that are going to see this podcast are now saying, the what? So maybe you could explain to people what the House Republican Policy Committee does, of which you're the chairman.
Sure. So I've served on the policy committee for the last 5 years, and I ran for chair because I believe so deeply in its mission and in the fact that we should be more focused on policy in Washington and less focused on politics. And I think that that's true of
Here, here.
both parties. So what the policy committee is a body that has representation from all of the different Republicans in all of the different regions of the country. And we are meant to be a focal point for developing meaningful conservative policy for the Republican conference. So every our country is geographically divided up into regions, and the Republican representatives in each region every 2 years elect two representatives, one to the steering committee, which is the committee on committees, the committee that decides which members sit on which committees, and another to the policy committee that is the body that I now lead that develops
It's
policy.
very much the politics and the policy. Because I can't imagine any process more political in Congress than a body that is deciding what committee every member serves on.
That's right. It's very political. You know what's funny? My wife and I are Survivor fans, and Survivor 50 is on, which is their 50th season. And it's like they've brought together all the top competitors from all the different seasons, and so we're watching this, and people are backstabbing and lying and saying they're going to vote for one person, voting for another. And I realize after having running in this conference-wide election that Survivor has nothing on the U.S. House of Representatives.
There you go.
It's very
By
much
the
a
way,
political problem.
this is an important time for me to take a 10-second break to say hello to Cheryl. And Cheryl, if I could choose which Obernolte I was going to spend time with, I'd rather spend it with you, but I got the congressman instead. Okay, now we can go back at it because I need to maintain my status as one of Cheryl's favorite people. And so I'm not above that kind of brown nosing in order to do that. Because if anybody knows the congressman's wife, she is absolutely charming and absolutely wonderful. And she loves her friends, and she's not somebody you want to tangle with.
No, no, she's the consummate mama bear, and everyone likes my wife in DC better than me as well. It's not just a California phenomenon, it's just the cross I have to bear. I've learned to
All
live with
right.
it.
So how many members end up being on the policy committee?
So there are 22 members of the policy committee, and the job of leading the policy committee also comes with a slot in our leadership structure because of the need for close coordination between what the policies committee is doing and what the rest of the conference is doing. And so that's why it is a conference-wide election. The RPC chairman is the number 6 Republican in the House and also sits on what we call ELK, the Elected Leadership Council, as well as the steering committee. So that's why it is a bigger election than just being elected by the members of the committee itself.
So are you the only Californian on there? Is the other regional representative from another state?
Regional Oh, you're talking about on steering? No, 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 we have, Ken Calvert is our regional representative and has been for a long time. So Ken is the regional representative, and then I have one of the leadership positions on the committee.
Got it. So, all right. And then I assume the committee comes with some policy focused staff people. Is it?
Yes, yeah. Yep, staff. And, interestingly, you really run on what your vision for the policy committee is. And the policy committee used to play a much larger role in developing policy than it does now. A few years ago, under Speaker Boehner, the policy committee and leadership kind of got at odds with each other. And so the role of the policy committee was minimized and hasn't really gotten brought back. And those policy muscles have atrophied. And so one of the things on my platform was I want to return the policy committee to what it was intended to do and the role it was intended to play. So we will see how well that goes.
Well, what we need to do is we need to combine your reinvigoration of the policy committee with some of the reforms we need in the House So I always hear the speaker and other people talking about a return to regular order, but it's not really a return to regular order until there's policy discussion, policy debate. So, but you know, I guess from your perspective, what's the point of having the opportunity to debate if you don't have issues that you've vetted and put forward to debate? Right. So, well, that's great. So you said it's the number 6 position. How many people sit at the leadership table? How many on the Republican side? How many people are like, maybe I should say it another way. When you go to your leadership meeting and the doors are closed and all the staff is out of it and it's just the principal members, I'm going to go out of my way to assume that the speaker's in the room and the majority leader's in the room
Yeah,
and the
there's
majority
number
whip
one and number two, the
and the
whip.
majority.
Yeah, the chair of the conference, Lisa McLean. We've got the vice chair, the secretary, me, and then we've got some other roles that are
Hudson be in
seats that are.
there?
I'm sorry.
Would the NRCC chairman sit in there? Or is
Yes,
that a
Rich Hudson.
right?
He's in our leadership structure, and also the chairs of our various caucuses. So the chair of the Main Street Caucus, the chair of the Republican Study Committee, who's my friend August Pfluger, the chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is the moderate caucus. So they all have seats as well. At the House Freedom Caucus, they have a seat on Elk.
All right. Well, speaking on behalf of me, myself, and I, and all of the people that know you, it makes me feel a little bit better knowing that you're in that room because I don't know all of the people in that room, but I know you. And I know that you bring a very, unfortunately, unique blend of commitment to conservative first principles combined with a heft. And I think those two things together become very important and become a very important perspective at a table that is clearly dominated by politics more than it's dominated by policy. And so we're going to cheer you on as you seek to level it out and see if, we can have more impact that way.
Well, John, I'm glad it makes you feel better. You feel better. I'm not sure I feel better. I'll tell you, we had our first conference meeting 2 days ago since my election, and so this was my first time sitting up at the table at the front of the room with the rest of the leadership instead of sitting in the audience. And as I looked out over my fellow conference members, I realized that now suddenly everything was my fault.
Yeah, the pressure's on, and I'm sure you're also gonna be getting all these phone calls. For every phone call that you get saying, "I think the policy committee should be focused on A, B, and C," you're gonna get 20 phone calls that are, "Hey, can you talk to the speaker for me about this? And can you talk to the majority leader for me about that?" Because, that's how politics works. So, now we're gonna pivot a little bit into an area of discussion that you know all too well, because we're gonna talk about artificial intelligence a little bit. By the way, for everybody watching, we could literally do a 6-part multi-hour mini-series with the congressman talking about AI policy. There's so much there. There's so much going on. I've talked about it a bit on my site. So my challenge is in about 20 minutes here to try to take a lot of people who don't know a lot about this and at least give them an understanding, I think, of from your perspective, kind of a few things. One, that kind of that framework of what should the role of the federal government be in AI policy versus what should the role of the states be under federalism with regards to AI policy. And then I think probably maybe some discussions about what's actually going on right now on the federal side. I suspect we're probably still going to have to blow a whistle because all these things are so in depth. But why don't we start really quickly by kind of framing this? What is you have a role in Congress, an official role with regards to AI. So maybe you could explain that to people watching because I think it'll add to their understanding of your not only credibility but from the vantage point from which you are both shaping your views and being able to try to move your views forward.
Right, sure. So I'm one of only 4 computer scientists in all of Congress, which means we are underrepresented. In fact, I'm the only member of Congress with a graduate degree in AI because that was my goal in life when
We
I was
pass a
going
law
to
that
grad school.
we pass a law that caps the number of lawyers, which by definition would mean we could have more normal people.
Yeah, or former staffers,
There you
political
go.
political science majors, you'd have to lump them in too. But in the last Congress, as you pointed out, I was the chairman of the House Artificial Intelligence Task Force. And that was a group of 24 members who were entrusted with the task of developing a federal regulatory framework for AI. So we took an entire year to do that, 25 hearings. And at the end, a year ago, we produced our work product, which was a 270-page document with 86 different concrete policy recommendations. And so now The work is to actually go about implementing them. And I'm embarrassed to say, so far we have done one and only one, which was the Take It Down Act on non-consensual intimate imagery. But there's a lot left to be done. Fortunately, the White House is also pushing on this. President Trump just last month put out his proposed White House regulatory framework for AI. And then he had an executive order that he issued last year just before Christmas on AI preemption. So, you take all of those things together and it gives us a pretty good roadmap for what we need to do. So we will be introducing very shortly here what we call Gaia, the Great American AI Act, that codifies the key pillars of the White House framework, as well as a lot of the recommendations out of the AI task force report. And we will, start having hearings and markups on that.
So I guess we could jump into it a little bit because my recollection, not having read it recently, was that the president's kind of, to the extent that there's a balance, like what do states do versus the federal government do? It felt like the president's position was basically the federal government should do everything and the states really shouldn't have a role at all. And me as a federalist, I'm like, well, there needs to be a part of this that is in the laboratory of the states as we try to figure out what works, especially in some of these areas of protecting children and guardrails, especially, and I'm going to throw this back to you. I'm a little bit cynical because Congress, I mean, to say it's one thing to say the federal government should preempt, but you also have to actually have policy to preempt with. And so part of my concern is if the federal government's position is this is a federal job, but then because of political divisions in Washington, nothing besides an executive order can advance because there's not harmony, could we end up in a situation where we go on way too long without guardrails because nobody can come to a consensus? And so I'm throwing that out to you as we discuss what you think, Congressman, should be the role of the states versus the role of the federal government.
It's a very important question. I'm glad you brought it up because it really is the center of this debate that we're having right now. And the president actually, in his executive order, did a pretty thoughtful job of breaking down where the areas of responsibility should be on preemption. And we were all talking as this document was being developed. So I'm glad that they went in the direction that they did because that's what we were urging them to do. What the president is saying is that there are some areas where it's clear that the federal government should take the primary role in regulation. Article 1 of the Constitution gives Congress and only Congress the authority to regulate interstate commerce. So anything that's interstate commerce fundamentally should be regulated only once at the federal level. But that leaves a lot of territory, as you say, under our system of federalism outside that. John, here's something that I wish more people understood. Nobody in DC is talking about the federal government and only the federal government regulating AI. I think everyone agrees that there should be a federal lane and a state lane for AI regulation. I think everyone agrees that the federal lane should be defined by our requirement under the Constitution to regulate interstate commerce. And I think everyone agrees that the federal government needs to go first in defining where those preemptive guardrails are so that there isn't any disagreement about what's a state responsibility and what's a federal responsibility. And then once we have done that, the states can go be the laboratories of democracy that they are and have always been. So the president, did a pretty thoughtful job of laying it out. In addition to the interstate commerce lane, he made the case that under a system of federalism, there are some things that have been traditionally relegated for regulation to the states, even though they might touch on interstate commerce. And the White House is saying we need to continue doing that. So those are things like education, that's predominantly regulated at the state level. Law enforcement is predominantly regulated state level. Insurance industry, even though that has a big interstate commerce component, we entrust state regulators to regulate insurance. And there's a list of those things that you can make. So we're trying to do a thoughtful job in navigating that. But it also has to be said, you are absolutely right when you say you cannot preempt something with nothing. And this is something that I have been very vocal in the last year about trying to communicate to leadership on both sides of the aisle, is that it has to be done atomically. You
Right,
can't just do preemption. You need to do preemption and the federal regulatory framework at the same time. And that way it's clear to everybody what you are preempting with.
Right. Put some hustle in the bustle. Connor on your staff will be very pleased at me doing this just because it means that I read your press releases. I just noticed that I think this week you and was it Congresswoman Jacobs out of San Diego have co-authored kind of a framework, some sort of committee. I assume that's directly to this issue, at least in terms of the House effort. So maybe you could talk about that. And by the way, I know that your your report and your committee that you had last year was bipartisan, and I see this effort is bipartisan, I think everyone would say that's a really good idea because, we don't know who's going to be in charge of Congress come January of next year. But if you engaged in a process that is bipartisan, you significantly increase the likelihood that a work product can get passed regardless of whether leadership changes. Maybe. All right. So what exactly is it that you introduced this week with Congresswoman Jacob?
Yeah, well, actually, we introduced quite a couple of bills with
Oh,
Congressman
great.
Jacobs. I got a bill with Congresswoman to get, and I've got a major bill that we're just rolling out on Monday with Congressman Liu, who is the my Democrat co-chair on our task force. And these are all different pieces of AI regulation, and we are
Ted
rolling
and
out.
I know each other. When he served in the legislature as well. So I actually at one point actually went and had lunch with him. He was serving in the reserves, and we had lunch at his reserve base. A very nice guy.
Yes.
What's the right way to say it? He would be a textbook example of the difference between a person when you're engaging like this in a discussion versus when everything is done in the laboratory of X and Instagram and TikTok, right? The person that I know him to be does not remotely resemble the person that he even himself makes himself out to be on social media.
Yeah, well, he's got his political reality. His district is pretty far left. I agree with you. He's a nice
But
guy, very
what
thoughtful guy. He also is a computer scientist. So I told you there were four computer scientists in
so he's
Congress.
one of
When
them.
between Ted and I, we are fully half of the computer scientists in Congress.
So let's
But
why
you
don't we
brought up
run
a
through
really
these why don't we
go
kind
ahead.
of run through these three bills that you're moving and then we're going to come back to the framework discussion. But I'd be curious to know because you're working across the aisle with three different Democrats,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, more
right?
than
So
three, actually. Yeah. I mean, we had 12 Democrats on our task force. And so what we're doing is we're demonstrating that different pieces of the task force report that you read are bipartisan. I mean, the whole task force report was bipartisan, was unanimously approved
and what we're
by
gonna
members of our
for those
task
of you
force. So,
for those of you watching, there's a link right below, straight to the task force report, so that you can read it as well.
yeah, a little
Or if you
bedside
want to
reading
cheat.
material.
Well, or what you could do, by the way, here's an AI hint for you. You can do what I did to start, because eventually I dug into it, but I just took the report and I uploaded it into ChatGPT and I said, "Can you give me an executive summary of this report section by section?" And that's what allowed me to digest it quickly. And then when I had an opportunity, I read. I don't know if I'm establishing my geek credentials by saying that I read the entire report, but I did. So
Well, we also wrote a human authored executive summary that people could read at the
I
beginning.
read
We
that
tried to be
too.
thoughtful.
We'll
Yeah,
link that
but
below too.
you made a
But
great
anyway, so
point,
tell us
though.
about these three bills.
Yeah, so I mean, the bills implement different sections of the task force report, things like the need for education, workforce education. We need to make sure we're equipping our young people with the tools that they need to succeed in an AI-enabled workplace. We're establishing grant programs to make sure that we that continue to catalyze research and development in AI outside of commercial entities because we want to continue that work being done in academia and academic settings because it comes along with things like transparency and publication and peer review. We want to establish the National AI Research Resource, which is a repository for data and compute that allows research to be done outside of places like Google and Anthropic, that are going to devote billions of dollars to it and have the money to be able to fund it. So these we're implementing all of these different pieces. But you made a really important point a couple of minutes ago that I wanted to highlight, which is that at the end of the day, whatever we do has to be bipartisan. And it doesn't matter if we have the pen or the Democrats have the pen, at some point, and may that day be long delayed, but no one knows who's going to control the House next year. And whoever controls the House is going to have the same problem that we have, which is that we need 60 votes in the Senate. And no matter who controls the Senate next year, neither party is going to have 60 votes in the Senate. So it's going to have to be bipartisan even to pass. But also, you made the point, it has to be bipartisan to be durable. And think about this, capital investment can figure out a way to profitability as long as it knows the rules. I mean, American businesses are incredibly competitive. We can compete anywhere in the world as long as you tell us what the rules are. But if you have a major industry where the rules are in danger of changing every couple of years, every time the winds of political fortune shift one way or the other, then you've set the stage for disincentivizing the capital investment that's going to make America successful in AI development and deployment. So there is benefit in that way in making it bipartisan as well, because at the end of the day, you want it to be durable. You don't want the rules to change every couple of years. That's what we're setting out to do, and that's why all of these bills communicate a powerful message, which is that we all agree on the high points here. We might get into the minutia and disagree, but the big points, the big important points of AI regulation, we all agree.
So let me ask this question, and if you've watched what I write or read, this question will be the least surprising question to you. So in this grand sort of what's the federal lane versus the state lane, like I have a lot of concerns about chatbots and the role of influencing young children and making sure that these companies that there's a regulatory framework in place that has real consequences when this happens. Is that something that we get to laboratory up in the 50 states and figure out what works to hold them accountable? Or is that something that Washington, D.C., with 435 members of Congress and massive lobbyists are going to come up with one imprint so that, like, if my kid, cuts themselves and I can show where on chatbot it did, I want to be able to sue the AI company. I want them to have strict liability. Am I going to Washington to make the case that they'd have strict liability for harming my child? Or am I going to my state capital to make that case? Under your view, I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. I just want to know, in your mind, those kinds of issues, the fundamental issues about when AI is bumping up against foundational the pillars of America, like if there's intrusion on family and social order and stuff like that, is that federal? Is that state?
Right. It's both, to answer your
Okay.
question. So it's a very, very timely issue, and it's one that we have been debating pretty intensely. And also, kids' online safety is one of the pillars of the White House AI regulatory framework, as it should be. And it's one of the pillars we talked about. The bill that I'm about to introduce covers most of the pillars. It does not cover that one because that's on a separate track. Just a couple of weeks ago in the House Energy and Commerce Committee, which is one of the committees I sit on, we passed out of markup onto the House floor a whole series of bills on kids' online safety that answer these questions, that attack it from different angles and attack different aspects of it, with the main goal of empowering parents to not only to have visibility and control over what their kids do online. So, but the White House executive order on preemption in December also addressed this issue. And one of the things they talked about was consumer protection, which traditionally is, under our system of federalism, something that we have delegated to the states. Each state has its own view of consumer protection. And, there is an element of consumer protection to this, and the states will continue to exercise their control over that element of consumer protection.
I was reading over, and I'm going to link it below. I saw a bill that got introduced by Senator Blackburn of Tennessee. She's certainly very engaged on this issue, and I assume you're familiar with the bill. We don't have time to talk about it today, but I would just tell you, as far as entries into the federal space, I found I found a lot that I liked in her bill. That doesn't mean that her bill represents the consensus about where people will be, but if I have enough FOMO already about not having a good senator from my own state, boy, I wish I could grab Senator Blackburn and have her represent our state, but I guess that would make two of us. Uh, um, so, all
What's
right.
funny
So
is all the time I have colleagues of mine that will come. We're losing a bunch of members of the House who are running for the Senate this year, right? And many of them will be successful. And so
she's running for
some close
governor, I
friends
think.
of mine, have come to me and said, "Jay, should I run for Senate because I think I could make it, but the president's offered to endorse me, but I really like serving in the House, and but the Senate, you get to do more." And I stop them. I always say, "Now, like, wait, we conservatives in California, we have a glass ceiling. Like, you will never be saying the words Senator Obernolte, right? There's no Senate for us. There is no governor for us. There's no AG for us. We have reached our pinnacle."
Exactly. And oh, by the way, there's a big part of California where it's actually aspirational to have as a pinnacle a member of Congress. And actually, this is actually a great transition. So at some point, Congressman, we're going to be back on talking more about AI as it develops because there's a lot going on in this space. And I've got some thoughts about more discussions with you on that. But actually, this is a good transition because I wanted to talk a little bit before we signed off about kind of Prop 50 and not the actual campaign. That's kind of in the rearview mirror. If you can frame an issue on whether you like or don't like Donald Trump, we know how it's going to go in a state that, Kamala Harris won by 20 points, right? So that's not my question, but kind of the aftermath of it, you're seeing a big reduction in the number. Well, big is relative. I think so. Right now, how many Republicans are there from California that sit in your delegation meetings, right? I guess
Nine
there's
this year.
nine. 10. There
Yep.
were 10, but then Congressman LaMalfa, rest in peace, passed
No,
away.
I'm counting him as one of the
Are you
9.
counting
Yeah,
his
we
seat?
have a special election. Hopefully, Mike Gallagher is going to be coming up and joining us here in June.
By the way,
But yeah,
I like
he's
Mike
one of the 9.
Gallagher, but he was from Wisconsin. This is James Gallagher.
But I'm sorry, James, you're right.
But Mike Gallagher's a great guy.
Mhm.
I'd have
Yep.
liked it if he stayed in Congress. He's another one who
Mhm.
had a lot of policy
Mhm.
smarts, but decided to move along. You know, he's from Orange County. I don't know if you knew that. Mike Gallagher. Yeah, yeah. I found that out. Costa Mesa.
A good poker player. Did you know that about him?
Oh, to see that
Yeah.
there's things you don't know. Oh, why don't you talk a little bit about Prop 50 now and what's coming out of the ruins for California on the Republicans? Who's still going to be with you? Where do we have, what I'm sure you're fluent on this.
Yes, very much. Yeah, obviously, Prop 50 devastating for conservative representation in California. And if you think about the facts here, we have about 1 in 4 registered voters that register Republicans in California. And that doesn't count all the people that are declined to state that lean Republican and usually vote for Republican candidates. But 1 in 4 registered Republicans, probably 1 in 3 regularly vote Republican. And right now we have 9 Republican seats out of 52. So, you do the math on that, it's not even, what, 20%, when we've got, you know, 25% registered, 33% that vote that way, and yet
Well,
we've
I mean,
got,
and understand there's no better benchmark than the fact that President Trump got 40, nearly right at about
right? Oh, yeah,
40% of
great.
the vote in
Good
California. So
example.
that
Yeah, there
that
you go.
that
Yep.
tells you what you need to know.
Yeah, and I remind the White House all the time that the president had more people vote for him in California than any other state. So, please don't punish us all for the actions of our nincompoop governor. So, but we're going to be, so now the Democrats are trying to cut us down to only 4 representatives from California. So less than 10% of the seats when, as you say, Donald Trump got over 40% of the vote. So, I mean, it's a ridiculous partisan gerrymander. And I oppose it for that reason, but I also oppose it. I opposed what they did in Texas. Even though that was to benefit Republicans at the expense of Democrats. And what happened in Virginia this week is awful as well. And the reason is because we all have to govern after the dust settles in an election and the representatives gather in Washington, D.C. And it's really difficult to make our democracy function if voters lose their faith and trust in the fairness of our elections and the underpinnings of our democracy. And when you do a mid-cycle, an obviously partisan mid-cycle redistrict, that's what you've done. You've shaken people's trust in our representative democracy, and that's a very unhealthy thing to do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So, on a more practical kind of analysis basis, obviously, you're now in a seat that is going to stay Republican because the irony is the few seats that are left are probably more Republican than ever. Although I don't know how much more Republican your seat could have gotten, but you and Congressman Fong and Congressman McClintock, and then I guess the fourth safe seat would be this one that is being contested between Ken Calvert and Young Kim. So those 4 seats you can put in the safe Republican column, and so then I guess we're dealing with the 48th, right? That's the seat that Congressman Issa chose not to run for, right? So we've got Supervisor Desmond as the Republican, and the Democrats are battling it out. And I think, and then incumbent Congressman Valadeo in the Valley, who has showed amazing resilience to win seats that don't go our way in the presidential election. So this is going to put him to the biggest test of all.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't count David out. We don't
No,
understand how he wins the district he already has. So
right.
just
He's
because
got a
they made his
magic,
district a couple points more Democrat doesn't mean that he's going to lose. So I wouldn't
right.
count him out of that fight.
Right, and then we've got you mentioned earlier about actually, I guess we were offline when you talked about post gubernatorial debate chit chat with now registered independent Congressman Kiley, and he'll have a novel run. He's running in a seat that was drawn to elect a Democrat, but I don't
Mhm.
know that they envisioned a Republican who would become an independent,
Right.
and
And if
so
you look at that district, when the last real test of an independent that we've seen in that district, it was when Poizner ran for insurance commissioner. And Poizner did very well. So maybe it's a strategy that will work. We will see.
right, and I know there's some other opportunities. Kevin Lincoln is running against Adam Gray,
Mhm.
so we have some hope there. And
Yeah, but John, don't forget. Everyone says that the Democrats drew the map in Prop 50 to split 5 seats. The number is not 5; it is 9. It's the 5 Republicans that they're trying to take out, plus the 4 Democrats that they shored up, who represent districts that voted for Donald Trump 2 years ago. So we had a legitimate shot at those districts. All four of them are districts that were flipped, that used to be
Yeah.
Republican districts. And so
And
we
we've
had a
got
legitimate shot at taking
yeah, we've
those
got
districts
a couple
back.
districts here and we got districts here in Orange County that are on the bubble. So what we need
Yeah,
to
so
do
the
is we
delta
need
is 9. It's not 5, it's 9.
right. I agree with that. And I was going to mention, kind of on a parting note on Prop 50, that I live in the town of Yorba Linda, California, which is in northeast Orange County. It's kind of known as an equestrian community, although there's fewer and fewer horses. But as long as I can go back, we've had a Republican representing us in Congress. In fact, we're the city, if you don't count Villa Park, which is this tiny little town, I mean, really tiny, we were the largest margin for President Trump of any city in Orange County. And our new representative now will be Norma Torres, I believe. I think that's who it is, right out of East LA. And they just come down and because that's what they do. In order to do this, they take parts of a conservative district and split it up. And each kind of like each Democrat says, well, I'll take that piece and I'll take that piece. And, you know, you end up with this big disconnect. I've offered to take her to the Nixon Library because I suspect she's never been there. So
Well, maybe. Well, that would be
we'll
an
see how
interesting
it
trip. You
goes.
know, it's their birthday today. I don't know when you're airing this, but today is Norma Tormez's birthday.
Well, I hope that you wish her a happy birthday and let her know that you had a podcast with one of her new constituents. So, that having been said, Congressman, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And like I said, I'd love to check back in with you once there's been more progress and we kind of see where things are going on the federal side with AI policy. And in the meantime, really appreciate your time and thank you for being in the breach, as they say, and serving as a member of Congress. We really appreciate it.
It's always great to chat with you, John.